Thank you for joining us for this webinar on electoral frontiers, political engagement in the digital age. I'm excited to introduce our panelists for today's conversation. Shirshji Jashal is an award-winning independent journalist based in India after stints in New York, Paris, and Berlin, and she is also a Pulitzer Center 2023 AI Accountability Fellow. She's written on various subjects, including politics, tech, human rights, and governance for The Caravan magazine, News Laundry, Vice World News, Al Jazeera, and other national and international media outlets. Hafiz Malik is a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Michigan Dearborn. He has researched automotive cybersecurity, internet-connected security, sensor security, multimedia forensics, and has been working with Deepfakes since 2015, building detection tools with his team in his lab. Neve McIntyre, also a 2023 AI Accountability Fellow, is a reporter on the Bureau of Investigative Journalism's Big Tech team. Before joining TBIJ, McIntyre spent 4 years as a data journalist at The Guardian, where she worked on data-driven news stories and investigations. Margaret Talev has spent her career covering American politics in the White House. She is the managing editor for politics at Axios and a CNN political analyst. She's the Kramer Director of the Institute of Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship at Syracuse University, a joint effort of the Newhouse School of Public Communications and the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. And moderating our conversation today is Jennifer Strong, also one of our 2023 AI Accountability Fellows. She's an audio journalist covering the impact of AI on the way we live and work. She hosts the podcast Shift and is the creator of several tech podcasts for newsrooms, including ProPublica, The Wall Street Journal, and MIT Technology Review. At any point throughout our discussion, please feel free to start adding questions for our panelists in that Q&A box. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jennifer and our panelists to dive into the incredible work they're all doing.
Thank you so much, Michaela. And hey, everybody, thank you for taking time to join us. You know, about half the world's population will have or has already had the opportunity to vote at some point this year. So with the US election now just right around the corner, it really feels like the perfect time for us to have this chat. So let's get started with slightly deeper introductions from everybody. As Michaela said, my name is Jennifer Strong. I'm an audio journalist. I've been covering AI since about 2016, I guess. Now, my Pulitzer project was an audio documentary for NPR stations. It's called The Race to Superintelligence, and I've also just made it available on my podcast that she mentioned that's distributed by Public Radio's PRX network. It's called Shift. And so, you know, we're dropping links to all of these stories and projects so that you'll be able to find them more easily. And Neve, why don't you go next and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm a big tech reporter at TBIJ. We're a nonprofit newsroom based in London. And my team's focus is on kind of labor issues in the technology industry, particularly those that affect kind of outsourced workers in the global south doing things like content moderation or data annotation. We also look at kind of influence operations and threats to democracy, AI-powered surveillance and defense tech, and the intersection of all of the above. Stories that I've worked on recently that have some relevance for today's discussion are around online gig work and its links to Russia's surveillance and censorship programs, the use of AI propaganda in the midst of recent riots and far-right violence we experienced here in the UK, and a scam network using deepfaked videos of UK and European politicians by placing thousands of ads on Meta to draw people into the scam. And the Pulitzer Center supported our investigation into Toloka, the gig work platform, which recruited workers on behalf of two Russian facial recognition companies called Entech Lab and Tivian. They're major suppliers of facial recognition software to Moscow city government and other local administrations. And the technology has been very widely used for kind of human rights violations. There's been hundreds of activists, protesters, people who oppose the war in Ukraine detained after being detected through these systems. And we tried to kind of flesh out the whole supply chain that was supporting the usage and training of that system, from gig workers to the Western investors that were invested in Toloka's parent company at the time, to the European entities that the gig work platform used. And yeah, we tried to kind of cover all those different global nodes of that network. But yeah, we can get more into the details later. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. I'll just move across the screen here. Shista, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. Happy to be here. I'm speaking from New Delhi right now, and we just had our elections. And so, for many journalists like me, it was quite a surprising election because Mr. Narendra Modi did not get the majority that everyone was expecting him to get. So that makes the work of journalists like us even more important. The kind of stories that I cover as an investigative journalist in India are at the intersection of social lives in India and technology, and how technology is interacting in a country like India, which is patriarchal, polarized, communal, and going through a very, very difficult time, transitioning from a democracy to an autocracy. The stories that as Neve and Jennifer, I'm also a Pulitzer Center AI Accountability Fellow. All of us were in the same cohort. The stories that Pulitzer Center supported are of the great relevance to this particular session. Involved the investigation into the WhatsApp machinery created by India's ruling party called Bharatiya Janata Party, and how many WhatsApp groups they come across, and how many WhatsApp groups they create, and how they influence communities using meta products, particularly WhatsApp, which is end-to-end encrypted, so not available to researchers or journalists so easily. The second story that I looked into was again at the intersection of tech and society, that how the BJP had created an application which uses ton of data to generate results using AI, based on which they can classify the constituencies in India, that where they are going to win and where they are going to lose. So based on that, they can target the voters or even suppress the voters. And this is something that we have seen during the Indian elections as well. There was a wide-scale voter suppression in the areas where BJP was supposed to lose. Many Muslims were not allowed to vote in India, and many other things that we will talk through the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Dr. Malik.
Hafiz Malik at University of Michigan, Dearborn. I've been working in this field of information authentication for many years. And since 2009-10, I started working in authentication of digital media, especially multimedia data, audio, video, and images. And the focus was basically how you can identify or how you can determine the integrity of content that either go into the legal proceedings or shared with the community, etc. And fast forward, we are in 2024, and technology has, you can say, at lightning speed, brought changes that society is not ready for. All the tools that were created back then for detecting forgeries, etc., they are ineffective today. So you need to come up with new tools, new technologies, so that you can detect them in, basically in a way that public can believe them. Public can get the truth about those content. Like previously, you just modify some part of the content. Today, you can generate them from scratch, and there's no trace whatsoever left in there. So for last, I would say 7 years or so, aggressively working on developing technologies to detect defects, especially in the audio space, because to me, audio is more challenging than audio and video, images and video, because if there are even any slightest telltale signs there, you cannot detect it. So anybody say, I can recognize audio by just listening it, forget about it. Okay, so our goal is to develop tools where journalists like you guys and others around the world can just come and just like submit your query about the content, audio, video, or images, and they can get the truth. Public like will do it. I doubt that. I question that one. Why public would do it? Because why they have to do 3 steps? Like take that content, go to my website or some other website and do it that for the validation, verification. Sometimes they have to register. Not gonna happen. Okay, only journalists, news outlets like yours would be basically doing, and we are trying to create technologies where people can see the truth about the content. We are like totally unbiased. We're publicly funded institution. My mission in this space is to basically develop technologies to restore public trust in our democratic system, in the society. Okay, and let people make their own decisions. And we have developed tools that are available now, but I think in the coming days, they are going to be even more easily available to the public as well. I'll stop here.
And Margaret, thank you, Hafiz.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks to everyone for having me. My name is Margaret Talev. I just want to clarify for my initial introduction, I was the managing editor at Axios through the last election cycle. I handed off the baton to my very capable successor. My role at Axios now is as senior contributor. In that role, I oversee our polling and focus group relationships as they relate to kind of political polling. We don't do horse race polling, but more issues polling. And I'll tell you more about that in a second. My primary role these days, in addition to my journalism work, is as the founding director for Syracuse's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, which is based in Washington, D.C. I'm in a hotel room in Syracuse today, so sorry for the bed in the background, but I am normally based in Washington, D.C. And the purpose of our institute is to examine through research and also through teaching and events the connections, the intersection between the news and media and social media that people consume, and how that shapes their views and their understanding of facts related to their government, their elected officials, democracy, and how all of that relates to civic engagement. So obviously, the rising concerns about AI, misinformation, and disinformation are centrally tied to all of these areas, to where people are getting their information, what they believe is true, their confusion around assessing what is true, and how that affects not just how they vote, but whether they bother to vote at all or whether they just sort of throw up their hands and give up, which is another really big concern that's emerging along with the world of deepfakes, et cetera. So in the university role, I have been really fortunate to partner this year with a colleague named Professor Jenny Stromer-Galley, and we lead a project that uses graph technology. We use Neo4j's graph technology to examine the spread of political information and misinformation as related to the presidential candidates through social media. And we had to draw our boundaries pretty tightly because, as Hafiz mentioned, and all of you have mentioned to some degree, it's so hard for researchers to actually be able to kind of to exert requests to scrape information from the other platforms. But on Facebook and Meta, we are able to as researchers. And so we've been examining just ads that mention presidential candidates' names on Facebook and Meta. So it's a pretty tight sort of box that we're looking at. But you can, even just within that small world, see how not just misinformation, but actual deepfakes or AI-generated both text and video content have proliferated, sometimes to shape voters' opinions about issues, and other times as financial scams that are meant to take advantage of people's political activism or political agitation in order to do something completely different, which is like grab your credit card information and start charging with wildless abandon. So that has been one area that I've been examining on the academic front. At Axios, we've had a really interesting partnership with the Harris poll over the course of this year for a project called the Vibes Poll, where we have sought to understood some of the psychology underpinning the way voters are viewing issues. And we started with the economy, but we have been closing the election year by looking at misinformation. I'm happy to share some of those results later in our call, but we really have gotten a sense through this survey work about not just how concerned people are about the spread of misinformation on political issues through AI, but how confused they are about how to ascertain what's fact and what isn't. So those are the two areas I've been really looking at.
Yeah. Amazing, everybody. Thank you so much. What a great group we've got gathered. Let's start with fear versus reality, because I think we've known the potential for AI tools to be used in new and much more aggressive ways this election cycle, and for generative AI to kind of come in and supercharge some of the things we knew in the past. But how much do we know about the way in which all of this is playing out? That part has felt much less clear, I think, to several of us, even on this call. I can get us started a bit with what we're seeing in the US. We've got information campaigns coming out of Russia that are manipulating videos of Vice President Harris and also trying to boost former President Trump. Meanwhile, Iran and China are trying to weigh him down. We also know, thanks to researchers at Microsoft, that this is likely going to get worse after the election as these groups try to sow doubt about the results, whatever they are, and cause mass confusion among the American public. And Microsoft has also reported in just the last few days that China is targeting down-ballot Republicans and also some sitting members of Congress who either promote policies that are adversarial in nature or just simply aren't in line with some of China's interests right now. But everybody else, I'm a big fan of just jumping in. Maybe we start with deepfakes. From your work, panelists, how do the fears stack up with the reality thus far in this year of elections? And just jump in, I'll make sure everybody gets a chance.
I'll go first on this one. I think in 2023, when I start, like winter of 2023, I was just aiming for 24, this election cycle. And I asked my group of students, hey, we will be creating digital personas of candidates. At that time, we knew that who will be running from the Democratic side, but on the Republican side, it was big field. And then we got all of them, then YouTubers and all those, like around 35, 40 personalities, and we create their digital personas. Then the goal was basically, how can we quickly, in no time, debunk those things? We didn't have the front end or the tools available, but we're developing technology with the aim that I knew it from like inside what are the limitations of current technologies to detect deepfakes and how attacker can take advantage of that. Never like publicly said it, won't be saying it right now either, but I've talked to reporters privately. Hey, this is, if you do ABC, you can get through the detection system. And attackers are aware of those things, and they've been using it, and that's what we have seen. Like when in January, we have seen robocall of President Joe Biden, and we were the one, like earliest one who debunked it in no time, because we had already developed a model for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, President Trump, and other running mates. And the goal was basically, hey, let the people see the truth. That was the ultimate goal. Restoring public trust in the technology. And the deep fakes have not basically, you can say, surprised me, okay? And how they are being played here in US and outside. And only surprise for me is First Amendment when I go to some law schools and give my talk over there. And when I say I'm developing technology and this should be ABC, you have seen in my Hill op-ed also, this is how you can handle this problem. It's a multi-pronged approach that you need to come up with to handle the threat of deepfakes. I'm not talking about the others, Margaret and others have mentioned. They are also playing out in the public sphere. We have seen it, okay? But the thing is, you need to basically develop technology for sure, AI for AI. Okay, you need to fight AI with AI technology developed. And then you need to have legislation for sure, making sure that you're not unnecessarily curbing the First Amendment or any of those things that are fundamentals to democracy. And then enforcing those things. I've seen these social media platforms, they're not taking responsibility. Under the pretext of freedom of speech, they let you tell them, hey, this is deepfake, please take it down. They are not going to do it. Okay, not going to do it because to me, they don't want to do it because that brings them more money. That's what my view is. Not University of Michigan. That's my view. Okay, they want to more clicks, more shares, more money. Simple. Okay, that makes their business model. So then public awareness. Events like this and others are doing it, telling public, hey, the thing that hit to your screen or something like that, just pause for a minute and do not flat out reject or accept it. Just take a moment and then make some informed decision on that. Try to validate some other sources, not social media, but maybe the formal, or traditional media outlets. So I'll stop here. Deepfakes have contaminated the information ecosystem and it's not going away. Yes, we'll see in the coming years, it is reaching the steady state. And then you have a technology that can at least label it. And then by that time, maybe we have legislation that can allow media, social media platform to basically at least label it, if not ignore it.
I would say that one of the trends that we're seeing this year, at least, is that there are a lot of deepfakes that have contaminated the political conversation, and yet I think that voters' perceptions about the prevalence of them is even worse than the reality, and yet voters are not being discerning in how they weigh and compare content. So I'll tell you what I mean. In this Axios 5 survey that I mentioned, 54% of voters said that they've now disengaged from politics because they can't tell what's true anymore. And yet we know that voters see something crazy on social media and just hit share or send because it's funny or scary or it makes them laugh or they know that their friends will really relate to it also. They may literally know that it's not true, but just send it for shock value, or they may really not be sure, hit share and think about it later. And what we're seeing in sort of a amalgamation of surveys and focus groups is that people say that there's so much misinformation out there and that it's so hard to know what's true anymore that they just don't really trust anything anymore. And so they're kind of putting, not everybody, but there is a pretty large population of Americans who participate in the political system who are just kind of saying, well, you can't really trust the news either. I mean, you can't trust TikTok, you can't trust network TV news, you can't trust major digital news sites, you can't trust any of it. And so they're blurring the distinctions between these two, perhaps because they don't know that mainstream news organizations have completely different thresholds and standards for publication that a serious news organization will seek to authenticate, will ensure the authentication of a video, a photograph, an allegation that's used, someone's supposed voice before they would publish it, whereas websites don't. So I think it's that blurring of the lines that's so concerning. And there's the University of Michigan's programs, there's many university programs that are seeking to develop and developing AI detection tools. There are great other resources from this organization that's convening this call to the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, to Witness, to groups like NewsGuard, to fact check organizations. There are ways to find out whether something is real or not. But because everybody has been reading about how prolific misinformation and AI deepfakes are, the kind of shortcut that a lot of people, especially younger people, have reached is just that you can't believe anything anymore. So why bother trying to figure it out? And that's very concerning.
Yeah, actually, I mean, Margaret, one thing that it jumped out to me the last couple of days, I think we all know this, but it's for people trying to figure out what's real or not, the access that they get to the things that are explosive and potentially not real versus the access to information, whether it was recently with the hurricane or anything else. Because that other element to this is just the algorithms and these social sites themselves downgrading or amplifying even certain keywords. And so a former colleague of mine now at the Washington Post just put out a piece that I've thrown in for these links, Jeffrey Fowler, showing that a popular YouTuber, anytime she mentioned anything related to politics over the last 6 months, her audience size dropped by 40% compared to a non-political post, and that even the single word vote is enough. So that word in a caption drops the audience by about 60%, right? So how journalists are supposed to break through in a world where like home pages die and apps aren't really visited, and we're just relying on these other apps, social apps. I'm not entirely sure, but Neve, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that Margaret and Hafiz said, which speak to our experience in reporting on the usage of deepfakes in the UK. So as I briefly mentioned at the top, we did a project looking at this network that was using deepfake videos of politicians, mostly UK, but also some European politicians, to promote a financial scam called like quantum AI. People lost, people said they'd lost significant amounts of money. And I would totally agree with Margaret that even though this network was motivated by financial gain, it definitely has that effect of breeding cynicism and lack of trust, and just this contributing to this huge tide of AI junk that constitutes a lot of what we see online now. And then to Hafiz's point about kind of detection and removal, when we investigated the network, a lot of, Meta has a transparency library that is supposed to record an ad as political versus an ad as commercial, and base that on if you mention like a politician. And we found that a lot of those tags were not being applied correctly. A lot of these ads were listed as commercial rather than political, even though they featured very well-known like our prime minister at the time. And also Meta said that they managed to take most of them down fairly quickly. Our numbers were like slightly different to theirs, but I think the use of AI as well means that just like it's so much easier to generate and proliferate this content. So Meta takes one page down and then there's like 10 more on the next day. So yeah, the detection and removal, I think, is a big challenge for sure.
Shristi, would you like to jump in?
I think in my understanding, what I have seen regarding this, so in India, it's as much as deepfake is a problem, it's also disinformation and misinformation at large. The problem is that the spread of this information pollution is far more than the fact checks around it. So if there is a deep fake fact check, and there are many active fact checkers working in India day and night to counter these fake narratives, but the spread is not as much as these deep fake information, and some of them disinformation particularly, I would say, it's so bizarre. But unfortunately, we have to remember that India is a country where digital literacy is very less, but digital penetration is a lot. The data in India is very cheap. Everyone has a smartphone in their hand, but they don't know how much to trust this particular information or not. The literacy is very poor. So it's very easy to make fools of these novice people, these naive people, and especially when the fact checks don't reach them. I remember during the process of reporting for a story, the propaganda in India, the WhatsApp story that I have linked also in the resources. I reached out to a man who had shared a deepfake video in the WhatsApp group. So when I reached out to him and I informed him that this is a deepfake video, but particularly this is disinformation linked with the Muslim minority of India, showing them in bad light. So he was quite surprised. He did not know that this was disinformation. And ever since I told him that, he has been much more. So I'm still part of these WhatsApp groups that I'm monitoring. So ever since, he has been much more observant and keen on verifying before he shares. But this is not the case at large when we see in India. Unfortunately, in our country, this is a very, very huge problem. And the resources to tackle this problem are very, very limited.
We're going to grab some questions from the audience in just a second here, but it sounds like we have a good number of journalists who joined us, and probably a number of them would love to know more about the methodology of some of these projects and how you tackled the questions you sought to answer. If anybody would like to jump in and share.
Yeah, I guess for the story I was talking about, the kind of deepfake scam network that yeah, my colleague Francesca Visser really led on. The methodology was quite data heavy, you know, using the Meta transparency library, doing keyword searches, and performing data analysis. I think the challenge with the methodology was you know, there's a much better level of data you can get from Meta when the ad's been labeled as a political or social issue ad. So we had to kind of be a bit creative with trying to record some of the ads that were incorrectly labeled as simply commercial. So yeah, it was quite a data heavy methodology, and then kind of, yeah, following up with, you know, some people who'd been affected by the scam.
Dr. Malik.
Yeah. So in like my case, when I look at this recent story on July 28th, when Kamala Harris, Vice President, started her campaign, and like Elon Musk like shared that infamous like video on like his Twitter feed and all those. When it came to me, I was looking at, like, if you look at the video part of it, it is original, kind of, it just cut paste from different places. The audio part was the one that has all the, like, basically, I mean, negativity in it, or the illicit intent there. And that was basically carefully crafted, as I said to you guys. There were music added into it so that the deepfake detector could not detect it, flat out. You understand? That was intentional. And that was like over 1.5 years of our research that we've been doing and looking at the pattern of the bad actor, what they're doing. I'm not saying that Elon Musk actually created it, but influencer like him has like millions of followers. Come on, give me a break. Don't do it. Okay? Because the thing is, you know it. It's not hilarious. It is not just like basically satire. There's a strict definition of satire and all those kind of things. So that was like one thing that was to be not like surprised when I look at it. There was some part which was original, some part that were like basically deepfake, but the deepfake was buried under music, that background music that was going on. Okay, and that was intentionally added to basically suppress. That's what my take is. Who created? I don't know. We don't know the source, but it was deepfake. Likewise, like recently, I mean, just like before that, I received deepfake of former President Donald Trump, and those deepfakes was pretty like a kind of strange to me. And some of those actually reached to me through my friend circles on WhatsApp also. Like Pakistani community is, oh, see, Donald Trump is supporting Pakistani, like, opposition leader Imran Khan and all those kind of things. And I said, oh my God, I just like basically debunked that one like 2 days ago, because those were like kind of clean deepfakes, but they were targeted on immigrant communities. Okay, immigrant, like basically voters, especially in the swing state like Michigan. Okay, so over like few thousand votes, that can make difference. Okay, they were like, for us, like relatively easy to detect, and they were generated through different tools that we were not aware of. But as I said early on, developing models of influencers, such as like basically politicians, heads of the state, and people in power, enable us to basically detect it in real time kind of thing. We're able to debunk it in fairly quickly. But they were like a kind of subtle message was, hey, you can just target like a community where you can spread this information. Hey, I'm just, in majority of the Pakistani immigrant, they like support Imran Khan. So if Trump is supporting them, supporting him, you know, what are going to be consequences? Who created it? I have no idea. That's not my job. My job is, it is deep fake, and that's pretty much it. Like, as a citizen, it's a different thing.
Yeah, part of why I'm asking everyone to chime in with how they took on these projects. I still feel like we're entering an age where, I say this a lot, like we're all AI journalists now. It doesn't really matter whether you cover politics or education or pharma or supply chain. It's like all of us are going to have some level of awareness, and yet AI is intimidating. This is outside of most people's area of expertise. And anyway, the barrier to entry feels high. So the more that we can all share how it is we go about some of these projects, maybe we can invite more of our colleagues into this and get people, more interested in feeling able to dive into some of these projects. So Shristi, do you also want to share some of how you approached your projects? Because for you too, this was, a new-ish area, right?
I think in my case, this was a combination of regular shoe leather reporting where I developed deep sources within the BJP who gave me access to the WhatsApp groups that otherwise are not accessible for journalists and researchers. And then the help that I got from researchers at Princeton University at Digital Witness Lab who helped me to do content analysis of these messages and also try to understand the frequency of messages around the prime political events. So, for instance, in our story, we looked around how the messaging in a small town of India changed or reacted during the Ram temple inauguration in India, which was one of the prime events. Or one can actually say how Mr. Modi opened his campaign for this year's election using that particular event. We saw how the pro-Hindu messages in the groups increased and how there were none of the messages which were pro-Muslim or pro-Islam. There were a lot of messages about Ram temple, lot of disinformation, misinformation that we saw. So this kind of content analysis gave a very strong structure to our story. But the story was just not just that. We tried to explore the structure and hierarchy of the BJP IT cell. That what is this IT cell or this IT farm harbored by one of the biggest political parties in the world, which has a huge human resource base. So we went in with multiple interviews at multiple level of BJP members, tried to understand what exactly this really means and how they have structured it. So this was mostly about my story around WhatsApp. For the second story around the Saral app, which is an app built by the BJP to look into to basically collect the data of the voters, a huge data set across India. So you can imagine India is one of the most populated country of the world right now. And to collect almost every data point about an individual from their religion to their caste to their color, education, where they studied, where they work, and all of that data point, using that data point to create some sort of activities for these individuals to see if they are engaging with BJP, and based on that, using technology and advanced algorithms to predict where they are going to win. Using that, they divide the constituencies into 4 categories. First category would be totally winnable, where they are definitely going to win, and the last category would be that where there's very little chance of winning. For the first category, what they would do is, one of my BJP sources revealed that they would increase the voter turnout. They would want people to come out and vote. And for the last category, where there is a very difficult chance for them to win, they would ensure that the voter is suppressed. And this is something that we also saw during the elections in India, that so Muslims usually do not vote for BJP because it's a very antagonizing party for them. It's Islamophobic, it dog whistles against Muslim, and Mr. Modi's entire campaign was very anti-Muslim rhetoric. So the places where there was large section of Muslims, either they were removed from the voter rolls or they were not allowed to go out and vote using goons or police machinery. And there was a large scale voter suppression. So things like that. And for the places where there is a competition or contesting ground between the opposite parties and BJP, what they do is they target the voters with calls and messages with something specific that they want. They know that a particular person is a student, so they would call them and tell them that we are going to give you a loan waiver if you want to study in this particular school. So they know that you are a farmer, so they will tell you that you will get a fertilizer subsidy if you vote for the BJP. For women, they will promise better street lights or better safety condition if you vote for BJP. And this may or may not be true. So it's a very targeted campaign and a very shrewd way to convince the voter to vote for them. And as we know, in today's era, data is money, and BJP's data collection was very, very huge. This is what the story indicated, and the kind of risk that poses to electoral democracy like India, where India's election commission is not aware, not in line, not prepared to tackle with anything like that. So the story particularly highlighted this.
Anybody else want to jump in here? Share a bit more. I mean, Margaret, I was thinking about the project that you were all doing with kind of what you found around advertising.
Yeah, well, thanks. So the project you're talking about is the election graph project at the Institute, at our Institute, and I will share sharing with the Pulitzer Center, and I think it'll be shared with participants in the call, links both to our election graph project on the IDJC's website and to that Axios Harris poll vibes poll, so that you can see the methodology on that, so that you can see the kind of research methodology for the election graph project as well. Before I forgot to, I just want to mention a couple of areas that Hafiz's earlier comments made me think of. And one is what we're broadly seeing this year is this sort of nexus between disinformation from other countries, whether it be Russia or to some extent China and Iran, the nexus between the disinformation campaigns from foreign actors and then the metabolization of that information from US domestic, either paid groups like marketing groups or content creators or whatever, or political advocates. So in the case of some of the most recent developments, you're seeing, and this is according to Microsoft, but also to the US intel agencies, you've seen the proliferation just in very recent days of fake online content that sort of works to smear the Democrats' Vice President Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, with allegations of like sexual impropriety and all stuff that's just nonsense. But intel agencies believe that those are generated by the Russians, but then spread domestically by pro-Trump accounts and pro-Trump groups on social media. Similarly, you guys will remember the major Justice Department case that actually has been quite undercovered, where they discovered that Russian media operatives were basically working secretly to employ content creators in the US, including a company in Tennessee, to like spread stuff that was just crap. And then the Justice Department actually removing dozens of domain sites, which is really, really unusual. So you can assume that this kind of scratches the surface. This isn't everything, right? But this is out there. Perhaps in some cases there's a witting partnership or a witting spread of information, but it certainly seems like in other cases, people have no idea where they're getting what they're spreading. They like the message, it suits their political purposes. They may not even know that it's actually a foreign op and they're being played, and the effort is to undermine the United States, not just a political opponent. The other piece I wanted to mention is just that we're seeing this trend with billionaires, and Elon Musk is the most obvious sort of face, not just because he's out there, but because it's the site formerly known as Twitter is his. But spreading these deep fakes, but it's not just Musk. There's a whole billionaire industry. The billionaires are being either duped or are enjoying it, depends on the case in particular. Spreading these conspiracy theories that are often fueled by AI generated misinformation content. There's some on the other side of the ideological spectrum. For example, some rampant sort of sub-conspiracy theories after the Butler assassination attempt, where liberals were spreading the baseless conspiracy theory that former President Trump had staged the assassination attempt against himself. So these are ways that a mysterious actor who could be an outside actor is dumping something into the ecosystem, and then just rank and file Americans, they may not even be making money off of it, are spreading it around. They don't even know where it's coming from. You asked, I do want to be responsive to your question, you asked about some of our findings. And what we did find, I mean, there's a lot of data points, but one of the things we found is that there are a lot of hidden actors, so you cannot see the connections overtly. Just if you're a member of the public and you're seeing these paid ads on Meta platforms, which is what we've been studying, you may not be able to tell how individual ads from individual groups with names that sound like real organizations, but like you've never heard of this organization, that somebody just made up the name. But if you're able to capture some of the connective tissue behind the scenes, a cell phone number that a registrant for the group has in common, a name that a registrant for the group has in common, a URL that these groups have in common, that behind the curtain, if you have access to the data and access to something like graph technology to connect the dots, that you can see that there's actually a deep interrelationship among clusters of these groups. And sometimes that's not nefarious. For example, you could be a Republican or a Democratic political consultant, and you could have paid for ads for 8 different candidates. And so they could all be captured on a web of commonality. But when they are scams or when they are concerted misinformation efforts, you can also sometimes see those dots connected, because you do, if you are setting up one of these ads, you do have to register some information with the platforms, and that information can sometimes be capturable. As somebody said earlier, there are a million sort of pop-up groups. So I'm just going to say, let's say I have a fake scam. I'm going to give you a red flag or a blue baseball cap with something on it. And so I just ask for your credit card information, but it's a scam. Well, Facebook is probably going to figure out eventually that it's a scam. Someone's going to call and complain and say, my credit card's being billed $350 a month, and for nothing, I never even got the dumb hat. So they're going to maybe shut down that site. But by the time they shut it down, or the second they shut it down, there's another one or another 7 that have instantly been set up that are basically almost to the I and the T, the exact same content. The group's got a different name. Some of the information around it is different. It's the same group.
I want to jump to something. I want to bring us back really to talk about trust, because it's like several of us have kept bringing up. I mean, sort of doesn't matter whether it's the hat, you know, as a financial scam or a different scam or whatever. Like the net is that there's a risk that nobody believes anything ever. A lot of us have worked on projects that are supposed to earn back public trust or prove authenticity of things, but you know, how are we feeling? What are we working on right now? And do we believe we can regain public trust? And, you know, what are we working on that might help to that end?
I can go first on that, because that's the mission of our work that we are doing, restoring public trust in the information ecosystem. So that's what we are doing. I strongly believe that, I mean, as I said early on, this is a transition in like engineering. In control theory, we call it, like, basically you go from one state to another state. So there is always going to be ripple, and then you have playing catch up, and then eventually you reach the steady state. Yes, it is contaminating the information ecosystem, has contaminated, not here, around the world. It is a fact. Okay. And I mean, what I predicted I remember like having discussion with my colleagues here at U of Dearborn, just before, like, this January 6th happened. And I was telling them, hey, we need to develop up like a group, or like a just group of researchers that like restoring public trust. And I'm talking about like, before January 6th. And we had a meeting on January 6th day here. And I somehow missed the meeting. I was just like joined them via phone. I was driving and said, hey, this was, I was telling you guys, this can happen. Okay, I'm not connected. I don't get the information from other things, but I do see what the technology is going to do to the society in general. As like Shirti just mentioned, like people have access to the technology, but they are not like basically their critical literacy level is relatively low. Okay, seeing is believing. We were in that age. So restoring public trust in the moving forward, I would say eventually, yes, we will get it. What time it's going to take, I don't know. I mean, AI will help us to get there. Okay, AI will uh, help us to get it because AI is the one that is creating it. So it has to be fought through that one. That's what I strongly believe. And eventually that's going to be the case. And technologies like ours and others have developed also quite a few. And big tech also have developed these things. I think eventually you will have a system where like basically you will have more like disclaimers about the content that are being consumed or shared on your like social media you can say feeds, etc. At the moment, we are kind of in unknown territory. Okay, and because legislations are not there, enforcement is not there, and around the world, it's not here in US, everywhere. I mean, last week there's a story in Pakistan. Some of you guys are aware of it. It is purely fabricated rape case created in Lahore, and the government has to shut down schools because people were protesting. And when they did the investigation, they came to know it was just word of mouth spread on like social media, and then like through like Telegram, it was, and they ran literally whole like I think the response was too slow. Had the technology there and they prompted the authorities in a timely manner, that would not be that kind of case. This is, we want to do everything, but tell us who is the victim, and there's no victim. And when they went to basically people, hey, who you heard it? I heard it from my friend. My friend was saying it. So like that's what's going on in the world right now. But I think technology has to be developed. It's not like you bring just like legislation and enforcement. Technology must be there, and then eventually we will get into the trust space back. How much is going to be that? What is going to be that shape? No idea. Okay, I don't see like what is going to be that shape, but yes, we will catch up. Okay, efforts like all of these investigative journalists are doing, they have like basically become like I think key component of just like cleaning up this whole mess that is in the information ecosystem right now there.
We're starting to run a little bit short on time. If anybody in the audience has something they want to ask, now is the moment to drop that into the chat. Before we move on, does anybody else want to chime in? Neve, I'm thinking, or Margaret.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely a big challenge at the moment to regain that trust. I think all we can do as journalists is kind of really focus on doing really strong accountability journalism. So like, yeah, Margaret was saying, tracking down the actors who are polluting the information ecosystem and trying to shed a bit of light on their activities. Like my broader focus is, looking at people who are using AI for real world harm. And even if only a small proportion of the people who, might have seen a bad actor's content or might have been harmed by an AI system, engage with our work, it's better than nothing. And I think at TBIJ, we have a really good focus on impact. So like when we publish a story, we don't just put it out there and then that's it. We kind of try as best as we can to, like engage with regulators, engage with politicians, engage with community groups, so that hopefully, it kind of does get out there into the real world beyond people who just read it on a screen. But it's a challenge. We're still figuring it out.
Margaret, did you have something to add?
Only super quickly. I'll just say I do think education is hugely important for this. I agree with Hafiz that we're in a transition period, and if if I thought it was beyond hope, none of us would be here, right? So we'll have to believe that that as people kind of understand what the new world is and get used to it, that they will behave differently when they see something that blows up their phone. They won't just be like, but I think education is hugely important. I think we have thought about that at the college level, but there are so many Americans and people around the world who don't have access to a four-year degree, that I think it really is essential that this not be just reserved for something that students are taught in university, that students are taught in high school or earlier, that they're taught in community colleges and trade school programs, and that we are teaching through major employers, companies like Walmart and Boeing, and and basically anything you can imagine. Institutions, and I know nobody has any trust in institutions anymore, but people do tend to trust their employers more than they trust just about anyone else, for better or for worse. So I think partnerships with employers on modern media literacy, on social media literacy, we need to attack this from multiple levels, not just from news organizations. Everybody needs to be singing off the same page. This really is a matter of national security, of freedom, democratic freedoms, of preserving civil rights and human rights. So I think it's hard. Everything's polarized. Congress can't get anything done. This is something that everybody has a stake in working on together.
Yeah, some basic literacy. There's someone in the audience, Jackie Spinner, put a question to us that are there resources, audio programs we can use to detect AI audio? And Dr. Malik has been providing will provide some resources that we'll make sure get into the chat and to get to people who would like to have it. We've got, I think, a minute left to go or so. I see Michaela there lingering in the background if you'd like to come back and join us.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and really appreciate you all taking the time. I know there is a lot more that we could discuss, and I just shared those resources that he mentioned with everyone. But I'll also be following up over email with lots of links to all of our panelists' reporting and other great work that they're doing. There's so much more to be diving into here. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up since we're nearing the end of the hour here. I wanted to share that we also have we have an upcoming webinar as well as a recording as a part of our election series here. So next week, we'll be discussing the rise of authoritarianism with Fula de St. Paulo's reporter Anna Albuquerque, and that'll be moderated by Simon Ostrovsky from PBS NewsHour. And then also you could watch the recording of last week's discussion on voter disenfranchisement with some of our local US news reporters talking about how they're working with their local communities to investigate voting trends here as they approach the election.